I feel like with short-term rentals, you're always learning something. I'm almost 3 years into this whole thing, and I am still amazed at how much I don't know. But at the same time, when I look back, I did learn a lot of lessons from trial and error. And I wanted to make this video to help anyone who is just starting out, or if you're looking for ways to improve, especially if you're tackling Airbnbs on the side, kind of like I am. This is a two-part video, and if you missed last week's, I'll link it in the description below. We'll jump straight into mistake number 1, which is setting and forgetting your pricing. If you use dynamic pricing software, which I think is a good idea, it can be kind of tempting to think you've checked pricing off the list and never have to think about it again. In reality, the market changes and sometimes pricing algorithms are just not perfect. Maybe there are a ton of new, really nice listings in your area and you go from being the top 1 percentile to maybe just top 5 to 10%, and your pricing will need to be adjusted to reflect that. Or you might notice a change in booking patterns. This happened to me. Compared to when I first started, people were starting to book with less lead time, booking these very last-minute trips. So instead of pricing at a premium for these really far-out dates and then having a steep discount as the dates got closer, I changed the pricing setting so that the far-out dates are, still a little bit more expensive, but I'm still more competitively priced than other listings in my area for those far-out dates. Because I really prefer when people just book further out, partly because I would still get a little bit of that higher pricing, but also just for my sanity purposes. Obviously, this may be different for your market. I'm just giving you an example of how things can change over time. Make it a habit to review pricing and your market data at least once a month and adjust what you're doing accordingly. Mistake number 2 is not collecting and filing for local taxes correctly. Vrbo take care of the majority of these tax withholdings and remitting it to the appropriate authorities for most jurisdictions. However, if you take bookings off of these platforms, like on booking.com, or if you have a direct booking website, or if your listing is in a special area like mine, where there is a county-specific or city-specific additional tax, you're going to have to do some extra work to make sure you set this up correctly on Airbnb and Vrbo and wherever to collect these taxes from your guests and file them correctly with the county. For my case, it's 6% additional and I have to do monthly filings. I was initially kind of mixed up on the calculations because I didn't quite understand what goes into this 6% tax. It's the nightly rate plus the cleaning fee, but not like a pet fee or if there's a charge for a late checkout or if there's any other incidental things that the guests have to reimburse you for. It's also not your final payout of what gets into your bank account because that accounts for the host commission. I have definitely had to go back and fix some of my incorrect filings. So I just wanted to share this with you guys in case you're also a little confused about how this all adds up. To help me remember, I've set up a recurring monthly task in my system that prompts me to look at all of my reservations and earnings for the month and file for taxes and pay them so that I avoid any penalty fees. Mistake number 3 is not getting professional photos. In this day and age, it's kind of a baseline minimum expectation. The $300 or so that you pay up front, you will definitely make it back. If you want to initially use just iPhone photos to get your listing going temporarily, that's fine, but I have a few tips for you. Firstly, make sure you're level. There is a grid that you can activate on your iPhone, and there's like a little level in the middle. Just make sure it's like completely lined up correctly. As you're taking the picture. I assume there's something like this on Androids. Second tip is to take the photo from like eye level of maybe like a 5-foot-ish person. Just go to Zillow, for example. Take a look at some real estate pictures. They're not taken from like way up high or way down low. They're kind of middle-ish. This is a mistake I've most often seen when the pictures are taken by really tall people. The pictures just kind of come out weird. And then lastly, you may laugh, but you got to make sure you're cleaning your lenses. The amount of times I've seen a blurry picture posted on a listing with like a weird flared light, you know it's because there's something not quite clean on the lens. Just rub it off with your even your clothing and the pictures will come out so much better. These pictures can get you by on the short term, but make sure you're still making plans to book an actual photographer. Mistake number 4 that I've made is not getting multiple quotes for work that needs to be done for replacements versus repair of an appliance, stuff like that. I used to just rely on the recommendations of a single contractor or from my realtor. I would just reach out to that one place and if it sounds reasonable, done. I'm going to blame this one on my healthcare background because if I had some sort of ailment, I go to a doctor and they diagnose it, they will recommend a treatment. And that's about it. Like, unless it's some crazy, super rare thing that needs a second opinion, there's kind of a standard of care, and I can expect that to be followed. I wouldn't necessarily get hugely different results from somewhere else. On the other hand, in the small business world, for something like an appliance repair person or for a landscaper, for example, there's not some super official certifying body that says this is the kind of qualification you need to mow somebody's lawn. There's not somebody that follows up and says, yep, this is like an appropriate amount of lawn mow. It's really just a bunch of small businesses that are one or two people, and you gotta call around and get quotes, talk to people, make sure you're comfortable working with them, and that you are on the same page about what needs to be done, how much everything's going to cost. You got to look at reviews and ask questions. Once I've started doing that, I realized, well, obviously the first person I call may not always be the best option. So nowadays, I always call at least 3 to 4 places to get information, get a quote, and this has really helped me get exactly what I need while keeping the costs under control. Mistake number 5 kind of goes hand in hand, and that's being cheap. This can be with work, with paying people, with reimbursements with guests when there's a mistake. It can also be the amenities that you're stocking the house with. Of course, there isn't one standard right answer because it depends on your target demographic. If you're catering mainly to college students who are from out of town, they really just want to do some couch surfing for as cheap as possible, they're not going to be as discerning as a big group that is booking a really nice house for over $1,000 a night. My suggestion is to take a look at the target demographic that you have, figure out what's average for them, and go above that. You want to find that sweet spot where you're exceeding expectations, but you're still keeping costs relatively under control. Specifically for reimbursing guests when there's a mistake or there's an inconvenience, make it substantial enough and also proportionate to the error. If you half-heartedly do it, like for example, if your AC is not working on a really hot summer day and the guests are here on a $3,000 booking, and if you reimburse them like $25, that doesn't really make any sense. Best case scenario, they feel neutral about it. Worst case, they get offended. Like, really? You think my trouble was only worth this much? Pick the correct amount, put yourself in their shoes, don't be cheap. And if it makes sense, send them something else in addition to the money. So for example, recently we had a freezer malfunction. It was sort of cooling to refrigerator levels, but it wasn't cold enough to make ice. We sent our guests ice bags from the grocery store and chocolates because they couldn't get ice cream in the freezer, in addition to the reimbursement as an apology and obviously a heartfelt message as well. And that is how you get 5 stars. Mistake number 6 is kind of on the opposite end, splurging on the wrong things. I am very prone to making this mistake. So a couple examples I can give you is art. The most important thing is that it looks nice and it goes well with the space. And secondly, that it is unique, not some mass-produced art that everyone has seen from IKEA. It doesn't have to cost a ton of money. And looking back, I wish we spent a little more time either thrifting or looking at like Facebook Marketplace sales or even DIYing some stuff for that unique touch without splurging on really expensive art pieces. The other thing I overdid was spending on the utensils and bowls and plates. These things are going to break and they're going to need replacing. As long as they are functional, they get the job done, and they don't look terrible, it's probably good enough. For most listings, a super cute handmade bowl that costs $20 each isn't really going to make a difference in terms of revenue, in terms of reviews. Mistake number 7 is not matching the advertised headcount and how many people this space can hold to the number of chairs, number of utensils, number of coffee mugs, and just the amount of amenities in the house should match how many people you're advertising for. When these things don't match, the guests just don't feel as comfortable, and it also feels like the host is trying to cram as many people into a space without being thoughtful of how they would feel. Mistake number 8 is failing on basic customer service. I have mainly heard this from my friends who, because I host on Airbnb and they know this and they know I have a YouTube channel, they are now sharing with me all their like Airbnb nightmare stories. Summarizing the common theme that people have shared with me is A, the hosts don't listen. They're more focused on being right, and they just have zero communication/customer service skills. And P.S. these friends are like really nice, accommodating, understanding people. all. The other complaint I've heard and personally experienced is just like communication not being prompt. If I'm asking a question, I really want an answer soon-ish, not like in 2 days. I have a whole video on how to get 5-star reviews, which I'll link below. I think most of the points I've mentioned there are still relevant today. My biggest tips overall are to treat your guests like guests. They're visitors in your listing and you truly want them to have a good time. Look at it from more of a real person to person angle versus just a business to customer angle. And always be prompt and pleasant. If you're not by default pleasant, and I feel like sometimes it's hard to like think in that voice of what would a super pleasant person say, especially if a message catches me like before coffee first thing in the morning. I get it. You can always draft something and put in ChatGPT and make it sound nicer. And C, for dealing with problems, always make the guest feel heard. Obviously, listen first, and then keep them in the loop as you are solving that problem, like what step you're at, what you're doing, actually solve the problem, and make sure to thank them for letting you know, because really they could have just left you a terrible review and not said anything. So look at it as them giving you an opportunity to fix something, and if the situation calls for it, reimburse them for the trouble that they went through, send them something without them asking for it. Just imagine yourself in their shoes and don't assume things about people, and just be a good person. All right, number 9 is not filling in all the blanks on your Airbnb or verbal listing. There are so many different spaces where you can enter information. There's the check boxes, and within the check boxes, there are further descriptions sometimes. There are captions to the photos. There's different paragraphs you can enter details on. If you're not sure what to write about because it seems obvious that, yeah, this is a photo of a kitchen, think about what questions people might have. Like, what kind of coffee maker is in this kitchen? Are the coffee beans provided? Are they beans or are they ground coffee? Imagine explaining your house to a really good friend who is also kind of picky. You could imagine me if you want. What are some questions they might ask? As long as your information is organized well, it really doesn't hurt to give them more detail than is necessary, and people will skim through and find what they need. Mistake number 10 is using your personal cell phone. This one, I really wish someone would have told me in the beginning, so I'm telling you guys now. When you put up your listing on whichever platform, you include your phone number, because sometimes guests want to contact you beyond the app. Maybe it's an emergency, they really want to call you. And that's totally fine, and that's just part of the experience. I don't know about you, but I have a habit of not picking up unknown numbers because there's just so much spam out there. So when I registered my personal number, I'd very occasionally get a call from a guest that I assumed to be just like a random robocall, and I would let it go to voicemail. Fortunately, this was very infrequent, and they would leave a message and I call them right back, and no harm done, but I still don't like how I've seemed really inaccessible. That's when I decided to register for a business phone number, and I got one through the place that I get my registered LLC. It's $9 a month as an add-on service, and now when people call me on that number, it comes to my like regular phone just as the beach house calling me. And now I would know, okay, this is something about my Airbnb, probably a guest, maybe a contractor or vendor. I should pick that up. Now, on the flip side, mistake number 11 is putting my business phone number on Google Business. Guys, do not do it. If you don't have to do it, don't do it. I thought, wow, I now have a business phone number. That's so cool. I'm going to set up my beach house on Google Business. I'm going to include the phone number in case people have questions, and maybe I'll get a booking that way. I was not aware the amount of scam calls you would get from just listing your number. At its peak, I would get the same call multiple times a day about how my Google Business is not verified. I need to verify a phone number. It sounds super legit, but it absolutely is a scam. I've tried to look on forums. A lot of people have the same issue and no one has quite figured out how to get rid of it. We've tried doing the do not call registry. That doesn't work. I've since taken the number down from Google Business and it's gotten better. I still somehow get these calls once a week. But yeah, moral of the story, do not register your business number on Google. Mistake number 12 is using credit cards poorly or not using them when you could. This tip only applies to people who have not been in credit card debt or are not currently in credit card debt. If this doesn't apply to you, that's okay. Skip to the next one, timestamp below. For everyone else, this is such an amazing way to get those credit card points to help fund your travel, the rest of your lifestyle, whatever you want, really. The initial setup cost of an Airbnb is perfect for working towards a sign-up bonus for a new card, and those can easily be thousands of dollars if you're using them for travel. The 0% APR intro offers can also help you kind of responsibly spread out how you're spending and let your money earn interest on the side. I'd only only recommend this if you already actually have the cash sitting, just choosing not to use it yet. Additionally, with a short-term rental, there are just so many routine expenses. There are linens and soaps and other bedding and whatever that needs replacing all the time. There's internet, insurance, utilities, all sorts of bills. Getting 2x points or a 2% back on literally everything really starts to add up for a business with this kind of expense. And those points have really helped subsidize a lot of our travels. Number 13 is a cleaning tip, and that is to give people access to some basic cleaning supplies if they want to clean up. No one likes a chores list, and that's not what I'm talking about here. But as a person who also stays at Airbnbs and travels with family, sometimes it's really nice to have just a cordless vacuum to quickly vacuum up those crumbs after my kids eat, to have a little cleaning spray and a kitchen rag to wipe down any spills. As a guest, obviously I am not trying to wash your floors and do all the chores for you, but I would like to have access to some basic cleaning supplies so that I can stay there more comfortably myself. And as a host, who wouldn't want a guest that can clean up after themselves? Number 14 is a restocking / pantry tip. Try to have a lock cupboard somewhere in the house, or if you can, an entire locked pantry behind a door. We're very fortunate to have a pantry that is behind a door, and we could change that door handle to a keypad lock so that it's only accessible by us and cleaners or maintenance people. It's really helpful to be able to restock stuff in bulk, like large bottles of shampoo, a lot of paper products, and kind of reduce your shopping trips, and only stock the kitchen and the bathrooms and everything with just enough for each time. Mistake number 15 is having unrealistic expectations for the business trips. This one I'm definitely guilty of, and I've done a couple of videos related to this, and I'll link those below as well. The idea of having this vacation home that I can go to that also exists as a profitable business, I think I got kind of carried away imagining what that could look like, thinking it would be this leisurely thing that I would just show up like one of my guests and just enjoy the house. There's a lot more that goes into a visit to our beach house. There's the planning, there's the coordinating any contractors we want to meet when we are there for a few days. Through our stay at the beach house, we're also looking for problems and trying to troubleshoot things. Problems that even if we're not completely DIYing a solution, we still have to coordinate and ask somebody to come solve it for us. They truly feel more like a business trip than something that's leisure. And I'm not just saying that in case an IRS person is watching. I'm actually headed back to the beach house in the next couple of weeks, and I'm curious to know whether it becomes more steady state, if the maintenance and visits become a little easier. I will keep you guys posted on how that goes. Mistake number 16 is not knowing when to outsource. I'm all for people being scrappy and hustling, and if that works for you to do everything yourself, that's great. But I also know a lot of you are like me. You have a main job, you have a family, you have other interests and things you just want to do with your time. At some point, you'll have to decide what your time is worth and whether you really need to be doing all these things yourself. Outsourcing can be in terms of software automation. It can be hiring a virtual assistant to help you organize the data of your Airbnb projection market analysis. The virtual assistant can also help you call pool contractors in the area and just get that initial quote going. It can also just be a more expensive cleaner that will do a more thorough job and do the inspection at the end, or communicate directly with your handy person to come do any fixes. Really anything that's kind of repetitive that you don't want to do, there's probably a solution with a price tag. Mistake number 17 is not knowing when to exit. Just to be clear, I'm not selling my place. I'm actually going to visit there, as I just mentioned. But the only reason I know that is because I ran some numbers. I looked at what the scenario would be if I were to sell it today, what the price might be, and after all the closing costs and whatnot, what I would take home, how that money could be otherwise deployed, what would the scenario look like in a 1031 exchange, and what would the scenario be if I just kept going, taking into account the changes in the marketplace and the rise of my property taxes, all of those things. I chose to continue after reviewing the numbers and reviewing my current lifestyle and what else I have on the plate. And I encourage you, if you already have some sort of real estate investment, to annually run the numbers and think about where you want to go from here and make that as a conscious, deliberate choice. Mistake number 18 is probably the most common one with beginners, and that is not starting at all. A lot of people are stuck in the analysis stage. They're thinking about doing it. They think things like, oh, I really want to get into Airbnb. I should learn about it. Then just do it. Break it down into smaller steps, like run numbers daily for 4 weeks. Whatever works for your schedule, make a plan, stick to it. By the end of, I don't know, 2-3 months tops, lay out how you're going to get this information so that you can make a decision. Do you want to keep going in pursuing a short-term rental? There's no wrong answer. And if you firmly decide at the end of that 3 months, this is not for you, or you just heard me say all these mistakes and all these things that you have to learn, and you feel like, you know what, this is not for me, that's totally fine. I'd rather see someone give this very clear, deliberate thought and decide to just move on and pick something else as a side hustle, or decide we don't need to do side hustles. I just want to enjoy my time. That is fine too. Be clear on your goals, make up your mind, keep moving forward with Airbnb if this is what you want to do, or just close that chapter, move on, do something else. And that's all I have to share for mistakes. I'm sure I will be making more mistakes, and that's okay. They're all opportunities to learn. If you have mistakes that you want to share with the other people in the community, please leave them below. I'd love to hear what else people have done and have learned from. I hope this was helpful to you. If so, please give this a thumbs up, and I will see you again next time. Bye.